Hello viewers, my name is Sianda Jobashe from Motherwell High School. Welcome to the Eastern Cape Department of Education broadcast studio. Today's lesson is about analysis and interpretation of financial statements. Now this topic is not new to you as you have looked at it in grade 10 as well as in grade 11. The only difference this time around in grade 12 is that there are new financial indicators that are being introduced as we are now working with a different form of ownership. We are working with a company. Now let's look at what we are going to be looking at today. When we look at our presentation outline, we will see that today we're going to look at the prior knowledge which you need to have right now, meaning that what are the things that you are supposed to know before you start looking at this topic? I have already stated that you need the analysis and interpretation understanding of grade 10 as well as grade 11. We are also going to be defining what is analysis and interpretation. We're going to look at the uses of financial statements, the categories of the financial indicators that we have. We are also going to be looking at the shareholding as well. Now, we're going to be defining what is this analysis and interpretation that we are talking about. Now, when we look at analysis and interpretation, we are talking about extracts of relevant information, because we don't take all the information, but only the relevant information from the financial statements, which interpret, what do they interpret? This information that we have taken from our financial statements. Why do we do that? This information is used because businesses might need to make decisions that are very important in terms of bettering the running of the business. Also, there are users of the financial statement which might be interested as well to look at these financial statements to make these decisions that are important as well. Now, when we look at this analysis and interpretation, you will find that the financial statements that we are going to be using, we first need to calculate our financial indicators. That's the first step that we need to do. It is to calculate our financial indicators. We're going to be looking at these financial indicators in detail further on in the presentation. Now, after we have calculated these financial indicators, we are then now able to analyze and interpret what we are getting from the results that we have calculated. Right. Now, let's move on as well to when we interpret this information that we have calculated, how do we then go about this process? We go about this process by taking last year's results of the financial indicators and compare it with this year's financial indicators. Now, when do we do that? We only do that if you are given in your exam paper only one business to work with in your analysis and interpretation. Now, when you are given more businesses, meaning two to compare, then that means that you are now going to be comparing information of the business with its competitors. All right. Now, why would we want to do that? We would want to do that. Let's look at these financial indicators that we are talking about. Now, when we look at the financial indicators, we've got different categories of financial indicators. Now, some of these you guys have looked at in grade 10 and in grade 11. Now, if we look at the categories of the financial indicators, as I've said, some would be familiar to you. Now, the first one that we see, it's profitability. All right, we've got profitability. All right. The second one is liquidity. The third one is solvency. We've got risk and gearing. Now, A to D, it's what you have been concentrating on in grade 10 as well as in grade 11. Now, in grade 12, we have introduced shareholders' returns, earnings, and dividends, because we know that a business that is able to control its expenses is able to maximize profits and make the most out of running of the business. Now let's look at the profitability financial indicators. Now these are very, very easy in terms of calculating, because the way in which they are written is exactly how you would end up calculating. But what is important to note here is the fact that when you are asked to comment on the profitability of the business, or if you are asked to comment on the operating efficiency of the business, you are not going to use the first two, which is the gross profit on sales as well as the gross profit on cost of sales. The only financial indicators under profitability that you need to look at, it is the last three: operating expenses on sales, as well as operating profit on sales, as well as net profit on sales. I'll repeat that again. The only financial indicators you need to look at when you are talking or you are commenting about profitability is going to be operating expenses on sales, operating profit on sales, and net profit on sales. The reason for that is because these financial indicators, operating expenses, has been included. In the first two, we have not included operating expenses in terms of our gross profit. Now, why am I saying this? If we look at the second financial indicator, which we also call the markup percentage or the percentage gross profit, that financial indicator is a policy financial indicator. What do I mean by that? The business is the one that is going to say how much the markup should be. So the business has a pricing policy that they will have. So do not use the first two financial indicators, the gross profit on sales, as well as the gross profit on cost of sales, to comment on the operating efficiency. Only look at the last three. Okay, now, what I want us to look at now is an example of how it would be asked in an exam. So if you look at the slide that I have right now, you will see that I have an information that is of financial indicators for the year ended 29 February 2024, as well as financial indicators of the previous year. This means that we are only working with one business. Remember, I did say when we are analyzing, you need to look at the information that you are given. Is it of one business or is it of two businesses? Now, looking at this financial indicator information that we are given here, you will see that it's only for one business. All right. Now, this information, even before you have looked at the questions, what does the question say? It's important for you to have an understanding, what are these financial indicators? Because you're going to end up needing to use them in order for you to get marks. Why do I say that? When you're asked a question in analysis and interpretation, it is important to quote the financial indicator that you are referring to in your answer, as well as comment on the trend, meaning has there been an increase or has there been a decrease in that financial indicator. So it's important for you to quote the correct financial indicator. How do you do that? By knowing in which category do each of these financial indicators in our information do they fall under. All right. Now, as we can see here, we've got percentage operating expenses on sales, we've got percentage markup achieved, and all other financial indicators. Now, let's look at a typical question. Now, if we look at this question, you will see that the question says, quote and explain two financial indicators which indicate that the company manages its expenses more efficiently. Now, do you see that the question here does not say comment on the profitability of the business? It says you need to explain, but you must also quote financial indicators that show that the business is doing what? Is managing its expenses efficiently. Okay? Sorry, it's managing its expenses well, meaning that the business is operating efficiently. All right. Now, what are the profitability financial indicators? Remember, I said to you that you don't use all of them. You only use the 3 that I indicated. What are these 3? Let's go back and look at it. The 3 that I said we need to look at, it is the operating expenses on sales, operating profit on sales, as well as the net profit on sales. Meaning that when we look at our information that we are given, we need to see if do we recognize any of those financial indicators in this information. When we look, the first 3 financial indicators are part of profitability. But remember, markup achieved, we cannot use it in our answer. As I've stated, that financial indicator is a pricing policy indicator. The business is the one that states how much markup they want to achieve. All right. So meaning that we are left with 2, which is exactly what we want. We want 2 financial indicators. That is why when we look at our answer here, we have only percentage operating expenses on sales, and we also have percentage operating profit on sales. Now remember, I also said when you are answering these questions here in analysis and interpretation, it's important for you to quote the financial indicator. Now here, the financial indicator has been quoted. What is this financial indicator? It is percentage operating expenses on sales. All right. Then what else do you need to do? You need to show the trend. What is the trend? Has this financial indicator gone up or has it gone down? Now, the percentage operating expenses on sales, as we can see, has decreased, as we have stated here. So, you have shown the trend. After you have shown the trend, you then use the figures. Now, it has decreased from what to what, meaning that what was our percentage operating expenses on sales in the previous financial year? What is it this year? So if we look at our answer, it says it has decreased from 23.2 to 21.6%. The same with the next financial indicator. That's how you answer such a question. Okay. Then we are done with looking at profitability. We are now going to move on to our next financial indicators, which falls part of our category of liquidity. Now, this is also financial indicators that you guys have looked at in grade 10 as well as in grade 11. But as I've said, these financial indicators are still examinable in grade 12. Now, when we look at liquidity, we are actually talking about our net working capital. So once again, just like in profitability where we had said that, in profitability, we look at the operating efficiency of the business. Now here in liquidity, we look at our net working capital. All right. What does liquidity look at? These financial indicators that we are going to be looking at, what are they trying to tell us? Now, when we are calculating our financial indicator of financial indicators of liquidity, we want to see as the business if are we able to pay our short-term debts. Now remember, we've got long-term debts and we've got short-term debts. When we talk about short-term debts, we are talking about our current liabilities. All right. Now, this means that are the current assets that we have here in the business able to cover our current liabilities, which are our short-term debts. Now, the liquidity financial indicators, there are 6 of them. It's the current ratio, the asset test ratio, stock turnover rate, stock holding period, the average debtors collection period, as well as the average creditors payment period. Now, let us look now, Let us look now at an example of a question that would be asked in an exam where we would need to now use liquidity financial indicators. Now, I'm going to use the same table that I used when I looked at profitability. It's got the same information as you can see, but I'm going to now look at a question that would relate to liquidity. Now, if we look at the question that I have here, the question here reads as follows. It says, suggest strategies that the company can employ to improve. Now, I don't want to move on in terms of reading this question because I want to actually emphasize on the fact that it says we want strategies to what? To improve what? Our net working capital. Meaning that when we are looking at our liquidity financial indicators in the information given, we need to look at financial indicators that are stating that there's an improvement that is needed. So we cannot look at financial indicators of liquidity that show that the business is liquid. What do I mean by that? If we go back to the information that we have here for liquidity, you will do what I said in the profitability, where you first identify which financial indicators are part of liquidity. Now, when we look at our financial indicators here, you will see that the financial indicators that relate to liquidity, it is the current ratio, it's the asset test ratio, it is our average debtors collection period, as well as our average creditors payment period. Now, when we look at these financial indicators, we now need to look at them one by one to see which of these financial indicators I have just recognized are part of the liquidity show that the business needs to improve. Now, when we look at the current ratio for the financial year ended 2023 was 1.9:1, but has increased to 2:1. Now that shows an improvement in terms of our liquidity. It means that as the business, we are liquid. There's no improvement needed. So you would not use the current ratio financial indicator in this instant. Because what the question states is that we need to look at strategies to improve our net working capital. Now, current ratio does not suggest any improvement needed. But when we look at the asset test ratio and when we look at the average debtors collection period, you will find that these two financial indicators do show that an improvement is needed in the business. So that's why when we go and look at our answer for this question, you will see that these are the two financial indicators that we would use in our answer. Even though we have identified 4 in the information, only these 2 are suggesting that there's an improvement that is needed in our net working capital. Now, when it comes to the strategies, meaning what are the things that we need to do in order for us to improve these financial indicators? Now, when we look at our asset test ratio, remember asset test ratio excludes the inventory. When it excludes the inventory, this means that we as the business are saying, are we able to cover our current liabilities in an instant where we are maybe not able to sell any of our stock? Would we still be able to cover our short-term debts? Now, in order for an improvement to happen, we need to make sure that our stock is moving as the business. So meaning that strategies that you would need to now note down are things that are going to talk to the improvement of the movement of stock. Things like the sales promotion, things like effective advertising that has been stated here. With the average debtors collection, if you look at the average debtors collection, it has increased. Ideally, as the business, we would like our debtors to pay us within 30 days. But when we look at our current years, what do we do in analysis and interpretation here in grade 12? What is expected of you? Now, what's expected of you is that you first need to calculate your financial indicators after you have drawn up your financial statements. Once you have your financial indicators calculated, you then need to analyze and interpret what do these financial indicators mean. How do you interpret? When you interpret this information, you need to look at the financial indicators of the business from the previous year and compare what you got last year with the current financial year's financial indicators. You would also compare the business's financial indicators with that of a similar business to see how is the business performing compared to other businesses in the same industry. Now let's look at the users of financial statements. As I said, that these users of financial statements would be interested in the financial indicators of the business in order for them to make financial decisions. Each of these users of financial statements have their own reason as to why they would be interested in the financial statements. We are looking at all the categories of the financial indicators. Which ones have we looked at in this session? We have looked at profitability. We have looked at liquidity. We have looked at solvency. Now, because of time, we are now going to wrap up our lesson and we are going to meet in our next lesson where we are now going to look at the last 3 financial indicators categories that are left, which is the risk and gearing, shareholders' returns, earnings and dividends, as well as share price and market prospects. I hope grade 12s that you have learned in this session, and I hope that this session has helped to enlighten you on how you are expected to answer your questions, as well as what is expected of you when you are studying this section. Now we have come to the end of our lesson. You can leave your questions on the comments. Don't forget to leave the name of your school so we can give a shout out. But please, we recommend and we ask that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching and see you in our next lesson when we look at the last 3 financial indicators. Thank you.